In digital media today, almost everyone agrees on one thing. Data is the most valuable asset in the business, and yet it's also the asset that creates the most confusion, fragmentation, and risk. Publishers are drowning in signals that they can't activate. Advertisers are demanding proof of outcomes that data can't always support. And across industries, teams are trying to prepare their data for an AI-driven future without really even agreeing on what good data is. Today, I want to unpack those challenges with someone who has had a front row seat on how data, identity, and measurement work in the real world. I'm joined by Brian Silver, EVP of Global Marketing Solutions at TransUnion. Brian has spent decades in senior leadership roles across digital ecosystem, including Oracle, Live Intent, and IAC. And we first worked together 10 years ago at Yahoo. Brian, I'm so glad that we finally made this conversation happen.
Thank you, James. It's great to see you again. And yeah, I can't believe Yahoo was 15 years ago that we first met. Crazy, crazy.
A lifetime in our world. Hey, before we get into the broader industry dynamics that we're going to go deep into, can you give a quick overview of the TransUnion Marketing Solutions and your role there, just so we have enough context so people understand your vantage point?
Sure. So again, thanks for having me. Really appreciate the conversation. The time of the conversation is incredible. So at TransUnion, I'm the global head of marketing solutions, which is all of the marketing and advertising solutions across identity, audience, and measurement, all underpinned by a global technology called OneTrue, in which, in order to think about it, all of our data is now in a single container on grid for the applications within each of those silos to be able to pull from. And I think what TransUnion is solving for, especially in marketing solutions, is the ability for us to resolve to a single identity. It's so important today. You mentioned it in your opening as far as fragmentation is concerned. We see that most marketers today are dealing with 16 disparate different systems in order for them to follow their customers or potential new customers across their journey, let alone even measure on them. And so, we're solving for that, and we're excited that we'll continue that part of the conversation.
Excellent. Now, you mentioned marketers and their data challenges. You also work with publishers. How different are the needs between advertisers and publishers in practice?
It's interesting. I mean, for a long time, right, there really is no difference between an advertiser and publisher. And what I mean by that is specific. So if we go back to the equation of advertising, of course, they're different. The publisher cares about yield. The advertiser cares about spending the least amount of money for the highest ROI, right, with efficiency. We have to remember that piece. But I think as time has gone on, if you're on somebody's site, yes, they're a publisher. Let's say it's Nordstrom's. Right, but all of a sudden, if you are, out in the universe, Nordstrom wants to understand me as a consumer sitting on their site, but they also want to understand other attributes or other, habits that I may have. And so the difference between the collected data or the persona of an individual that Nordstrom understands, whether or not they're publisher or advertiser, really has come together. I think where it gets very interesting is now in the world of AI, where the utilization of somebody's first-party data or the utilization of the understanding of a consumer as they travel around the internet, the ability for somebody on the publisher side or the advertiser to then reconcile to that, to be able to perform against that consumer, it has become even more interesting.
So I want to get into that, in particular into sort of identity mapping, but let's step back and just talk about the fragmentation, because I still see a lot of fragmentation across the value chain, especially in CTV and streaming, and especially when you layer in different regulatory environments in different countries. From your perspective, how do companies think about data consistency and measurement when the ecosystem is still so fragmented?
Well, I mean, I think that's where they're looking for a partner like TransUnion, right? Where they understand that the ability for us to resolve that identity into a single persona is incredibly important. And then to be able to then understand how to amalgamate more and more of those personas together, even in an anonymized way, for them to be able to, find their new customer, measure against those customers, et cetera. I think that's important. I think that, when you talk about CTV channels, if you talk about, every other channel that's out there, yes, there are fragmented point solutions that are there. When I talk to our customers, the most important thing that they tell me is that the value proposition that TransUnion or others like us can provide is a foundational element to their business, a way for them to understand the identity, a way for them to understand how to measure against their campaigns and continuously, pull that into almost like a flywheel, into a loop where, the outcomes, right, are as critical as the inputs. And today that fragmentation makes that very difficult unless you're dealing with or working with a partner like TransUnion.
So one way that people try to deal with fragmentation is to ensure that everybody's at least speaking the common language. But as an industry, we don't have a single common identifier, and obviously cookie deprecation is, slowly deteriorated in value. You work with all of the major identity solutions, Ramp ID, ID5, and others. How big a pain point is identity today, and how do you see that landscape evolving?
Yeah, look, I think it's still to play out. I think AI has a big piece to play in this as far as activation is concerned. But I think you're right. I think the story is still being written today. I think that just having interoperability with all of the alternate IDs is an important part of the story, but I'm not sure that it's the end of the story. I'm not sure that actually has been written yet. And I think that people are utilizing AI to see where and how this can become more efficient as time goes on.
So you've said AI, and I've got to let you get there now. So we can't talk about
you can't have a conversation today without the utilization of this technology. It's sort of all consuming at this point.
So do you think that companies have really come to terms with the sort of quality, structure, and governance of the data, given that AI systems are now depending on it to be effective?
So quick answer is no. I think everyone is starting to realize that this is not just another industry cliche, like the year of mobile was many decades ago, or measurement is a real thing, you should go after it, right? AI is not just another feature or functionality. It's a way of life that everybody has to, step up and recognize. So that's number one. Number two, right? I have already started to put out thought leadership piece around the utilization of AI. The cliche of garbage in equals garbage out is as real with AI as it's ever been with any other movement and evolution. And so we believe very strongly that you have to have the highest quality and scale of data. That's important. We just did a use case with Actable. And one of the things that came out of the Actable study is that at least 60% of all AI initiatives today will fail because of the lack of quality of their data or lack of signal within their data itself. And so you have to have the right types of data. You have to have the right ability to then consolidate that data so that when you're utilizing AI, and we'll just talk about it in two ways, either efficiency or propensity. So on the efficiency side, I think a lot of people have really figured out search and discovery. Right? What's the ability for me to add some form of, agent that's sitting on top of my UI so that I can discover data or my users can discover data much quicker and much faster? Great. I think that's a perfect start. But then to be able to then use that information for propensity purposes, right? Solve real problems. I think people are just starting to understand that is something that needs to happen and needs to happen rather quickly.
So let me follow up on that. If 60% of, and was it the projects that fail, or 60% of companies fail in their AI initiatives?
Companies/projects, same thing.
Of the 40% that presumably are not failing, what are they doing differently that the 60% is not? And it's a deliberately open-ended question.
No, I get it. So I think that, again, quality of data and the data signal that they get is incredibly important. Right. So I noticed I didn't say the size of the 40% of each of those opportunities. A lot of them are relatively small. People are just starting to figure this out in little microcosms. Right. It takes a while for it to scale to the size and the scope of what is needed in order for these to become more industry-wide and accepted applications or uses of AI. And so again, where we sit, it's very strong in the fact that we believe that our data being being brought to the table has been, developed over the 40 plus years of TU's history. And then the ability for us to apply the right type of utilization of AI for our customers in our sweet spot, right? In identity resolution, in the ability for us to provide audiences and solve problems. And I'll give an example. So I was talking to a large OEM not very long ago, and one of the things they told me is, hey, 50% of all of my customers today, I already know will not come back in the future to buy this car brand again. So I said, well, what if I have the ability to not only tell you which 50% of your customers will come back, but more importantly, what if I have the ability to provide you with data, audience segments, et cetera, to make sure that the other 50% come back, become new customers for you? And their mind was blown. They said, you can do that? I said, we can do that. And we can do that in real time. And so it's not just understanding like the resolution of the foundational elements that I think is important, James. I think we still have to be curious of what problems are we trying to solve for the customers, for the marketers, for the brands. And that I think is critical. While everybody is running to say, hey, I have this AI agent or I'm working with this application or whatever, is it really at the point of scale to solve customer problems? And that's where we're heading today. And we're really excited about that.
What are the themes in those that are using AI effectively? Is it that they're more focused, that they're focused on smaller projects, that they're experimenting quicker, that they know their data better? And I'm obviously throwing lots of stuff at you, but people would have lots of different hypotheses for the companies that are succeeding in their AI projects. What are you seeing in terms of commonalities across the companies that are being effective right now?
Yeah, look, I think it's three, right? I've mentioned them before, but I'll categorize them explicitly, right? Identity resolution is key, right? The ability for you to be able to resolve into that identity is an incredibly important part. And I think if you're a company today and you're listening to this and you don't feel like you have the highest fidelity of resolution to your own customer data set or to future data sets, put a little effort in there because it's going to be worth the return on investment. The second is just data enrichment, right? The ability for the lack of depth or the lack of, breadth of the amount of data that you can then utilize, call it coal in the engine, and then what energy output you're going to be getting. Like that's where, people need to understand that data, enrichment is truly important. And then I think last is connectivity, right? And so, today there's a lot of companies out there that may not have the integrations deep into the walled gardens. There's companies that don't have the breadth of, different publishers or marketers outside of the US. And I think that globalization is key. I think that connectivity is key. And so that last piece is not just the ability to go and find your users there, but then how do you measure and bring that information back? Again, that flywheel. So that way you utilize your identity resolution, you're doing the highest quality of data enrichment, and then you're measuring off of that so that you're continuously optimizing and making sure that not only are you solving your problem, but you're doing so at the highest level of efficiency. And I think that people are, again, just starting to get into this notion, but to me, categorically, like those are the three things that are critical in today's market.
More broadly, so we've been focused on AI, but what is the biggest mistake that you see companies make with their data and identity assets? Is it governance? Is it the fact they're not structuring it correctly? Like again, deliberately open-ended question.
Yeah, I know. And unfortunately, I'm going to keep bringing it back to the same point, which is, I think that there's been a very interesting conversation in market for a while now. We'll call it the data war, right? Between demand side and supply side. You mentioned it earlier. I think that people are starting to wake up and recognize that the supply side has a lot more power than it was giving itself credit for a while. When people go to sites and they become customers, right, or they even become just known to the publisher side, the sell side of the universe, right, they have the ability to then have a relationship with that consumer. And I think that that's a critically important part to, right, how to solve the problem that you're mentioning. I think on the demand side, right, where they basically just said, hey, look, I know you want to do these things, but without my demand, you're not going to have the return that you need from a business perspective in order for you to go out there and win. I think that we're reshaping what the relationship is between the demand side and the supply side. So that's number one. So number two is there aren't that many publishers in this world. And even when we were in Yahoo, right, as one of the largest publishers that existed on the planet, we just didn't have enough regulated data for us to be able to, continuously grow. You had to go have partnerships, and you had to go, increase your data size and your fidelity and resolution of that data in order for you to continue to drive your business forward. And so it's not a mistake that anyone is making, but everyone, understands that, you can't just do it alone. You're not going to have the amount of scale that you think you're going to need in order for you to continuously grow your business. You're not going to have the feature functionality set that's sitting in your technology stack in order to provide the right, return against that audience, or even provide the best customer experience for that audience. And so I think that the problems haven't changed, James. I think we've been solving these types of problems for decades, like you said. But I think it's really critical that people recognize that even though the problem hasn't changed, right? It's the partnerships that matter. It's the people that are thinking now about what the future of our industry is going to look like, and how best to then capture the most amount of dollars in order to solve our customers' problems.
I want to come back to something that you said, because it really piqued my interest. The phrase that publishers maybe haven't been getting the credit for their data, because as you know, I've been doing this a really long time. I've heard a lot of publishers say my data is oh so valuable. Why does nobody recognize that? And so I want to understand where you're coming from there. Is it that the economics is starting to change, that new business models are starting to evolve? Maybe that publishers, instead of just using their data for targeting, are actually starting to syndicate and use it in different ways? Where were you going with that comment? Because it's so interesting to me.
I mean, again, it is interesting only because I have also spent most of my career on the supply side, right? And I think that it was an unfair position to always feel like no matter how much fidelity and resolution I had on my customer set, or even my expanded customer set, I couldn't go to a, call it a P&G and say, hey, by the way, we really need you to spend money against this, because they were like, it's just not big enough. Or, yes, it's a nice slice, but, how do you figure out the next step or the next evolution of this piece? And I think that the supply side, if you just look at the SSPs across the industry today, right, are really starting to figure out that there are alternatives to the way in which people monetize consumers. There are alternatives to the way in which we can provide different experiences to those consumers in a much more intelligent way than we've been able to in the past. And I think that, to me, it also piques my interest, James. Just like you, I don't think the answer is out there yet, but I think that, the tide has shifted, and it's going to be really interesting to watch how this plays out.
Building on that, as someone who looks at companies from a lot of organizations from the outside, I'm often surprised by how much data gets collected but is never used. And again, I think we can talk, about our Yahoo days, since it's so long in the past. We had mountains and mountains of data, but only a fraction of it was used either for targeting or consumer knowledge. A lot of it was just stored. So what do you see the best companies doing when it comes to measurement, experimentation, or demonstrating performance?
Yeah, I mean, I'll double down on what I said before. This is all about solving customer problems, real problems for them, like the OEM example that I gave, right? We can give other, retail examples all the time, which is, how do I go and find my consumer or the next consumer to do certain things? Propensity models are a huge part of the future, and being able to score those propensity models and be able to, predict before a dollar is even spent, how we think the audience is going to react to this creative or this content or these, elements is the part of the new frontier, the AI frontier, if you have it. And so, again, very exciting times that we're in. Really, interested in. I mean, everyone says it, but I think it's critical. The speed in which this is happening is astronomical. If we would have had this conversation 3 months ago, I would have had half or 3/4 of the knowledge that I have today. If we have this conversation in 3 months or 6 months, half the answers that I gave may have been right or wrong. It's yet to be determined. That's how quickly this is going. And so if I have any advice for your audience, right, who's listening to this, it's stop standing on the sidelines, fearing what, is being said about AI and the utilization of the technologies that are out there. Start using it every day. Not just simplifying your tasks, but start applying it to the problems that you believe that you're solving for your customers today? And are you doing enough in order for it to be the right place for your future? And that's why I'm so excited about what TransUnion Marketing Solutions is doing, because we've been thinking about this. We're executing against it, and our customers are noticing and are actually very satisfied in the way in which we're doing it.
You've opened a door for me that I've got to jump through. I gave a presentation, Austin, a couple of months ago on the evolution of AI, and I used a framework where some activities are just going to evolve, and we know exactly what the next step's going to be. Some are completely revolutionary in that the business model breaks, and we have to sort of start from scratch.
Yeah.
And then there was some where it was too early to tell. So sort of thinking about how quickly this world of AI is evolving, what do you think now? You just said in the last 3 months that either you've changed your mind on in the last 3 months, or you know now that you didn't know 3 months ago about working with AI.
Yeah, so I'll open it up into the area that I'm most unsure about right now. So there's a whole notion around agents, right, becoming like synthetic traffic around the internet, and then the ability to then verify those agents to actually reconcile to a consumer. I think that's going to be a very interesting part of the evolution of our company. So far in this conversation, we've talked about what I call real things, right? Tangible things that we're able to control, that we're able to put out there and solve for. I'm not sure what's going to happen, right, with synthetic traffic, and how is that, going to play out over the next, 6 months or 12 months. I'll be interested to come back and discuss that with you. And
be clear, you're actually talking about non-human traffic generated by agents in this context.
So this is where it gets really strange, right? Because some of it is, so that's bots, right? So non-human traffic.
Yeah.
Some of it are people, agents that are acting on behalf of an individual. Or individuals.
Yes.
And so it just spreads like wildfire. So now all of a sudden, the size of somebody's traffic may be quadrupled. How does that reconcile into ROI in our space? How does that reconcile into solving problems or getting people to actually show up in stores or back on in the car dealership? Still to be determined.
I love it. Brian, this is the Yield Doctor podcast, and nobody gets away without a revenue question. What is the one thing that most publishers or ad tech companies can be doing better with their identity or data strategy to make more money?
Yeah, I mean, I said it earlier, I'll say it again. If you're not investing in identity resolution, if you're not investing in really understanding how your current consumer set or future, consumer set is resolved across the web, you're making a mistake. You need to absolutely invest in that, because the return that you will get from understanding that is immeasurable today.
Thank you, Brian. This has been a great conversation. As we wrap up, what is the best way for people to learn more about you and the work that your team is doing?
Sure. So always come into transunion.com/insight. Of course, you can follow us on LinkedIn, and I'm always available. Brian Silver, easy to find.
Thank you, Brian. This is the Yield Doctor podcast. I am James Deaker. Thanks for watching.